Picture the grandest table in England. Now put a dying man at the head of it. Give him 13 dishes at a sitting, swan and heron and venison in frumenti, Gascon wine the colour of garnets, a sugar castle with his own arms done in gilded almond paste. Give him a leg that weeps through its bandages under the table while he eats, a waist that will measure 54 inches around before he is done, and a temper that can end a career, or a life, between the second course and the cheese. Now stand a young man behind his chair, close enough to smell the rosewater on the royal fingers and the rot in the royal shin, a young man whose whole employment is to carry that food, kneel with it, taste it against poison, and never, ever eat it. That's the privy chamber table of King Henry VIII in the last years of his life. The best food in the kingdom, and the men who handled it every day went off at night to their own bread and pottage and thanked God for the arrangement. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists gawping at the portraits, the big flat confident face and the hands on the hips. We're living it. One servant, one table, 3 winters and a bit. Everything he would have seen, smelled, carried, and survived. And let me be honest with you about the title before we go in, because this channel does not sell you a trick. Nobody at that court refused the king's food because it was foul. It was the finest cooking in Northern Europe, and the men who made it were artists. When I tell you that even his servants refused to eat what King Henry ate, I mean something quieter and stranger and better documented than that. The men and women who fed him could see, close up and every single day, exactly what that table was doing to the man at the head of it, and they themselves ate otherwise, plainer, coarser, and, by the accident of their low station, better. The ordinances that govern the household survive. The kitchen accounts survive. The armour survives, and you can go and stand in front of it and read his waistline off the steel. This story is built out of those documents, and when I reach the edge of what the documents say, I will tell you so. One more thing, and it matters. The rooms in this story are real. The dates are real. The dishes, the prices, the ceremonies, the deaths. Real, and I'll give them to you straight. But the young man whose hand you're about to wear for the next few hours is stitched together from the wage books, from 100 grooms and servers whose names sit in the accounts next to their 40 shillings a year and nothing else. History kept their pay and lost their lives. Tonight I'm lending you a pair of their eyes, and I'll always tell you where the record ends and the borrowing begins. Also, and I say this with love, there was no turkey leg. You've seen the cartoon, the king with a drumstick in his fist, hurling bones over his shoulder to the dogs. It never happened that way. Turkeys were a brand new curiosity in the England of the 1540s, barely off the boat, and the king dined with washed hands, a laid cloth, a napkin, and more ceremony than a coronation gets today. The truth is worse than the cartoon, and far more interesting. He destroyed himself politely with a spoon in front of witnesses following the rules. So, I make these history stories and I genuinely cannot tell anymore whether anyone sleeps to them or whether you're all just weirdos who like drifting off to the smell of an ulcerated royal leg losing an argument with a plate of roast swan. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable, here we go. The loaf is still warm when old Piers cuts it, and the knife goes through the crust with a sound like a held breath being let out. You're holding the towel. That is your entire function at this moment of your life. At 7 in the morning in the autumn of 1543, in a small panelled room at Hampton Court that smells of wood smoke and rosewater and river damp. You hold a folded linen towel at the level of your chest, arms steady, while a man old enough to be your grandfather performs surgery on a loaf of bread. It is not ordinary bread. It is manchet, the whitest bread made in England, flour bolted through linen until it runs like pale dust, and each loaf comes up from the bakehouse counted, because each loaf is for one mouth only, and that mouth belongs to the King of England. Piers takes the first cut and pares it, trimming the crust the way you'd trim a heretic's argument, and then he does the thing you were warned about and still were not ready for the first time you saw it. He eats a piece, deliberately, publicly, chewing with his eyes half closed like a man listening for a wrong note in a choir. He is not stealing, he is assaying. Every single thing that will touch the king's lips this morning, the bread, the ale, the butter, the salt itself, must first pass through the body of a servant, because a king who can be poisoned is a kingdom that can be poisoned, and this ceremony is older than the palace it happens in. If there is death in the loaf, Piers Woad will find it the hard way, and the fact that he has performed this office for more than 30 years and is still upright is either a testament to the loyalty of English bakers or the luck of a man who has gambled his stomach against the crown's enemies 10,000 times and never lost. He swallows, he nods, he kisses the towel you're holding, actually presses his dry old lips to the linen, because even the cloth that touches the king's bread must be shown to be honest. And the bread is now not bread anymore. It is the king's bread, sealed by ceremony, and from this moment until it reaches the royal table, nobody, not you, not a duke, not the Archbishop of Canterbury himself, may touch it with a bare hand. Welcome to the Privy Chamber service of King Henry VIII, October 1543. Nothing reaches the king untasted. Nothing reaches the king uncounted, and nothing about this morning is unusual, except that it is your first. Your name is Roland Marsh. You are 19 years old, out of Kent, born on the edge of the marshes near Faversham, where your father grazes wethers on salt grass, and you've been inside the wall of this palace for 11 days. You got here the way every servant of the crown gets here, which is to say through another servant. Your mother's brother spent 20 years as a yeoman of the guard, took a pike wound in the thigh at Flodden the year before you were born, and banked every favour he was ever owed to buy his sister's son a place. The place is this: groom and server attending the king's chamber under Mr. John Aveley, gentleman usher. 40 shillings a year, a livery coat of the king's colours, and bouche of court, which means the crown feeds you, houses you, and owns you, roughly in that order. Back home, everyone said serving the king would either make you or destroy you. You've been here 11 days, and you already understand that they are not offering 2 possibilities. They were describing one process. The morning you first stood in that pantry room, you learned the shape of your new world in about 4 hours, the way you learn the shape of cold water by falling into it. The world is a chain, and you are a link in the middle of it. At one end of the chain is the largest kitchen in England, 55 rooms, boiling houses and pastry houses, and a cellar that swallows wine by the ton, staffed by 200 men who feed 600 people twice a day, and you will never see the inside of it. That has to be said plainly, because you assumed, coming up from Kent, that a man who serves food would know the place where food is made. He does not. The kitchens are their own kingdom with their own officers and their own wars, and everything you will ever know about them arrives the way it arrives this morning, as heat and noise through a serving hatch, as a wall of smell, beef fat, char, boiling bones, hot pastry, scalded milk that rolls up the service passage and hits you like weather. Your world begins at the dresser, the long board where finished dishes come up from below and are handed across the border into the world of ceremony. Below the dresser, fire, sweat, shouting, men with burned forearms. Above the dresser, silence, linen, guilt, and men like you, walking slowly with heavy things. The dish comes up, the dish goes on. The dish comes down again, later, lighter. That is the whole of it. The dish goes up, the dish comes down. You will say that sentence to yourself 1,000 times before this story's over, the way other men say prayers. And at the other end of the chain, behind 2 guarded doors, in a room you have not yet entered, is the king. You have not seen him yet. 11 days, and you have not seen him. You have seen his dinner, though, and that was enough to keep you awake the first night doing sums on the ceiling in the dark. You have watched the procession form at the dresser, the covered dishes, silver and silver gilt, going up 2 by 2 in the hands of men who walk as if the floor might be listening. You have counted. On an ordinary day, a nothing day, a Tuesday. The first course for the king's own mess runs to 7 or 8 dishes, and the second course to as many again, and the surviving ordinances of this household, written out at Eltham back in 1526 when the great cardinal still ran everything, allow the king's table more than 12 dishes at a sit-in as his plain entitlement. Beef, mutton, veal, swan, capons, pheasant, heron, venison baked in coffins of pastry, fritters, custards, and that is before anyone has done anything ambitious. It is not that he eats all of it. You will learn the arithmetic of that later, where the untouched dishes go. Who eats in the shadow of the king's leavings, all the way down to the beggars at the gate? The chain has a bottom as well as a top, and the bottom is a woman you have not met yet, standing in the cold with a wooden bowl. But it comes to the table because it must. The table is not a meal. The table is a statement made daily in meat, that the King of England can command the fat of the land every day of his life, war or peace, sick or well. You are 19, and you have never in your life had 13 of anything. You're gripping that towel like it owes you rent, Piers says, not looking at you. His voice is like the rest of him, dry and precise, a voice kept in a drawer with the good linen. Loose hands, boy, steady hands, empty face. That's the whole trade. Everything else is walking. Steady hands, empty face. Write that down somewhere inside yourself, because it is the first commandment of your new religion, and Mr. Avely will spend the next month beating the rest of the catechism into you an hour at a time. John Avely is the gentleman usher who owns your days, a man past 50, grey as a church, with a back so straight you suspect a spine of ash wood, and eyes that do to a room what a housewife's finger does to a shelf. He has served in the king's chambers since before you were born. He does not shout. He has never once in your hearing raised his voice, and you will come to understand that this is because raised voices are for men who have doubts about being obeyed. On your second morning he stood you in an empty gallery with a silver dish in your hands. Empty, just the dish, and made you walk the length of it, 40 yards, while he watched. Then again, 11 times, and on the 11th he said, "Now you are carrying it." Before, you were only holding it, and walked away, and you stood there sweating in the cold, and understood you'd been paid a wage's worth of praise. Here is what he teaches, hour by hour, day by day, until it moves into your hands and stops passing through your head at all. You never turn your back on the king's person, his chair, or his cloth of estate. You leave a room the way the tide leaves a beach, facing what you're leaving. You are bareheaded in his rooms always, and your knee learns the floor, at the door, at the table, at the handing of every dish. You do not speak, you are not spoken to, you do not see what happens at the table, and you especially do not see it if it is interesting. If the king laughs, your face does not change. If the king throws a dish, and Mr. Avely says this with no more weight than the rest, which tells you everything, your face does not change, and you kneel, and you clear it. You are not a man in that room, he says, on the 4th or 5th morning, tapping your chest once with one dry finger. You're a pair of hands the room keeps. The day the king notices you exists, one of two things has happened. Either you have done something wrong, or you are about to be more important than is safe. Pray for neither. Carry, kneel, withdraw. The king eats. England watches. You are the part of England that holds the plate. And when I say the table is a ceremony, I need you to understand what that means in this place. Because it isn't manners. It isn't the way your mother made you wait for the priest to sit. This is liturgy, rehearsed and ranked, with more officers than a parish has saints. Before a single dish leaves the dresser, the table itself is built like an altar. A gentleman spreads the board with 3 cloths of fine damask. Laid just so, the folds kiss straight. The great salt goes down, a fortress of silver gilt as long as your forearm, and it goes down before anything else, because where the salt sits, rank begins. The trencher bread is set, the napkins folded, the spoons laid, the great gilt cup stationed at the cupboard with its own attendant like a horse with its own groom, and every man who touches any of it first bows to the empty chair. To the empty chair. You saw that on your 3rd day and nearly laughed, and the nearness of that laugh still frightens you. A procession of grown men, some of them gentlemen born, bowing in perfect gravity to a vacant seat, and a cloth hung on the wall behind it. Piers caught your face on the way out. He didn't scold. He just said, walking in that dry linen voice, "The chair is never empty, boy. The king sits in it whether he's in it or not. Sooner you feel that, sooner you're safe." You feel it now. 11 days in, you bow to the chair like everyone else. And the strange thing, the thing you could not explain in a letter home if you could write one, is that it doesn't feel foolish anymore. It feels like handling something heavy. Now, what do you eat? Because that is the question this whole story turns on, so let's have it early and honestly. You eat twice a day, in hall or at the board assigned to your mess, and the crown decides every mouthful, and it is written down. That's your bouche of court, a daily allowance of bread, ale, and the meat of the hall kitchen, plus firewood and candle in winter, all set out in the ordinances as exactly as a mason's contract. Your bread is not manchy, your bread is cheat, good wheaten bread with the coarser part of the flour still in it, browner, denser, a bread with its boots on. And here is the first irony of your new life, though it will take you 3 years and a dead king to see it whole. The physicians of your own age, the learned men with their Galen and their regimens, will tell anyone who pays them that cheat bread scours the body and keeps it sound, and that the finest white manchet is a rich man's indulgence. You eat the healthy bread because you're too lowly for the unhealthy kind. Your ale comes in a leather jack, brewed in the palace's own brewhouse, and the scale of that brewing is one of those figures you will learn from Clerk Wendon and never quite believe. This household drinks its way through some 600,000 gallons of ale in a year. 600,000. Wendon says it the way other men say the names of battles. Ale for 600 people, twice a day, every day. because the water is not to be trusted and everyone knows it, and your meat is the hall's meat. Boiled beef and mutton from the great cauldrons, roast on flesh days if your mess is lucky, pottage thick with peas and onions and barley, stockfish and salt herring on Fridays and Saturdays, and all through Lent, cheese, and now and again a wedge of pie that comes down the chain from tables higher than yours. It is plain, it is brown, and it repeats itself. After the 10th straight day of boiled beef, you would commit small crimes for your mother's samphire and a fresh place out of the swale. But you eat until you are full, twice every day of the world, which is more than your father can say in a bad march, and there is a thing you notice in the first fortnight and file away without understanding it. The men of the household are by and large sound, weathered, scarred, bow-legged, some of them ancient, but sound. Piers is past 60 and walks 3 miles of corridor a day. Mr. Avely is past 50 and stands like a lance. You will spend the next 3 years watching the best-fed man in England rot from the legs up, while the men who eat his leavings carry him about like a reliquary, and no one in the entire palace will ever once say the obvious thing out loud, because saying it is treason, and treason at this court has a short and public arithmetic. Your nights, for the record, are spent in a garret over the outer court that you share with 3 other grooms, in a bed you share with one of them. That's normal. Nobody at your level sleeps alone. Privacy is for men with land. And the one you share it with is Ned Perce. Ned is 20, London-born, son of a Cheapside cook who died owing money to half the ward, and he has been in service here 2 years, which makes him your senior, your guide, and the appointed thorn in your side. He is quick, funny, always half a beat from trouble, and he has one conversation endlessly renewed: food, and how a clever man might get more of it. "You know what goes back down those stairs?" he says. "Your first week. Lying in the dark with his hands behind his head. Whole capons, Roland. Baked venison with 1 slice out of it. Custards a spoon's been through once. A man could live like a bishop off what that table doesn't want. You will hear this speech, with variations, 100 times, and you will watch it slowly stop being talk. File that away too. And there is Joan Becks. Joan belongs to the Ewery, the office of basins, water and linen, which means she commands the border country between clean and dirty, and nothing crosses that border without her knowing. She's a few years older than you, a widow at 23, Suffolk-born, with forearms that could row a wherry, and a way of looking at the palace's great ones when their backs are turned, as if she were weighing them for market. It is Joan who feeds you your first real gossip, in the 3rd week, in the passage outside the Ewery, in a voice pitched for the space between 2 people and no further. You had asked, stupidly, greenly, why the king dines so seldom in his great chamber, why all this ceremony funnels into a small room, a privy chamber, with a handful of gentlemen and the door shut. Joan looked at you for a moment, deciding something. Then she said, "Because walking hurts him, chick. The leg's bad again. It's been bad since before you came. It was bad last year. It'll be bad till God takes him. They dress it of a morning, and some mornings you can hear him through 2 doors. He dines close because the distance from his bed to that chair is the distance he can do like a king. Beyond that, men have to help him, and he'd rather dine in a cupboard than be seen helped." She straightened the linen over her arm. "You didn't hear it from me. You didn't hear it from anyone. There's men been shortened for saying less." And she was gone down the passage, and you stood there with your heart going, understanding all at once that you had been given 2 things, a fact and a lesson in the price of facts. This palace runs on meat and secrets, and both of them spoil if they're left out in the open. The man who taught you the meat side of that ledger, the meat, the money, the whole groaning arithmetic of it, is Clark Wendon. And Wendon deserves his portrait here, because without him you would have gone through these years seeing only dishes, and because of him you saw numbers, and the numbers are where this story keeps its horror. Wendon is a clerk attached to the counting house, the Board of Green Cloth as it's called, where the great officers sit at a green-covered table and audit every egg this household cracks. He is somewhere between 40 and 60. Ink preserves a man strangely, with stained fingers, a squint like a stitch pulled tight, and the only genuine passion you have ever seen him display is for a column that sums correctly on the first pass. He caught you, in your first month, counting dishes at the dresser on your fingers, lips moving, and instead of mocking you, he did something no one had done since the priest at Faversham gave up on you. He taught you, odd hours, in the counting-house passage with a slate. Figures first, then letters enough to read a bill of fare. A man who carries and cannot count, he said, is a wheelbarrow. And through Wendon, over months, the palace turned itself into numbers for you, and you have never been able to unsee them since. Listen to a year of this household, the way he recites it, flat as psalms. 1,200 oxen and better, 8,200 sheep, 2,300 deer, 760 calves, near 2,000 pigs, boars for the Christmas season, cranes and swans and herons by the dozen for the great days. Wine coming up the Thames in barges, reckoned by the ton, and a ton is 252 gallons of Gascon claret, and the cellar takes them in by the 100. And the ale, always the ale, that figure like a war. 600,000 gallons, brewed, carried, drunk, gone. Now, Wendon says, the slate between you, and this is the lesson you remember whole, the King's board, attend, and he chalks it out. The Eltham book allows the King's mess, dinner and supper, a bill that costs more in a day than a ploughman earns in a year. One goes through it dish by dish, and it comes out somewhere past 100 shillings a day in raw provision for that one table, against your own board wages of 40 shillings for a year of your life. You did that sum 3 times because you thought you'd slipped a figure. You hadn't. The King's Tuesday dinner outspends your whole year, and there are 2 meals a day, and 365 days in a year, and the kitchen books balance every one of them, because Wendon and his brethren would sooner die than carry a farthing wrong. Is it waste, boy? He asked you once. Watching your face do sums, you said you didn't know. It is not, he said. Waste is provision unaccounted. This is all accounted. Every uneaten capon has a destination written down for it before it's plucked. The King's table is the head of a river, and the river waters the whole realm in little. You'll see. Then he took the slate back and, because he is Wendon, corrected the angle of your sevens. Remember the ledger. Remember that there is a page in it, ruled and ruled again, where the King's own mess is entered day by day, dish by dish, and that Wendon will let you read it, and that a day is coming, years off yet in a cold season, when that page will tell you something before any physician says it aloud. The dish goes up, the dish comes down, and Wendon writes it both ways. You see the King himself for the first time on a Sunday in November 1543, and it happens the way everything happens to you now, because someone hands you something heavy and points. A server of the outer chamber has a flux and cannot stand. Mr. Avely looks down the line of grooms. His eye stops on you the way a bird's shadow stops on a field. Marsh, third dish, second course. You carry, you kneel, you give it to the gentleman at the board, you withdraw. You are furniture that walks. Go. And so you're in the procession, hands under a covered silver dish of teals in a gravy that steams through the joints of the cover and heats your thumbs, walking at the pace Avely beat into you, through the watching chamber where men fall silent as the food goes by. They bare their heads to it, understand, grown men uncap to a dish of duck because of whose dish it is, and through a door and another door, and then the room is small and warm and golden with candlelight on gilt, and there he is. And here is where your whole green idea of the world quietly breaks and reforms, because you had a picture in your head, and the picture was wrong in both directions at once. You expected a monster of fat. He is enormous, yes, the frame of a big man 6 foot and more, gone vast, the shoulders still architectural under a gown of russet velvet furred with sable, the great slabbed face above the collar, small eyes set in it like currants pushed into dough. The chair under him is not a chair as you know chairs. It is built, joined oak, broad as a church door, cushioned, and when he shifts his weight it speaks under him, a low wooden groan, and no one in the room hears it, which is to say, everyone hears it, and no one hears it. But you expected grossness, and what fills the room instead is glamour. There is no other word, and you don't have that word yet, so you think of it as weather. He's talking as you enter, telling a story in French to a gentleman at his elbow, and then breaking off into English for the joke, and the room laughs, and the laugh is real, pulled out of the listeners like a hook pulls fish, and his hands, you cannot stop watching his hands, which are beautiful, truly, ringed, white, precise. He takes a morsel from the dish before him with 3 fingers, exact as a goldsmith, touches his fingers to the napkin his carver holds, and goes on with the story. There is music somewhere behind you, viols, playing softly under the talk, because the king's meat is always accompanied, food and music being 2 courses of one service. The cloth is snow, the plate is gold and silver gilt, and an officer stands at the cupboard doing nothing but guard and pour and taste the wine. The cup is assayed too, every filling, a splash into the little basin, drunk by the cupbearer under the king's own uninterested eye. The whole poison liturgy running along quietly inside the meal like a second heartbeat. Nothing reaches the king untasted. You kneel. You deliver your teals into the hands of a gentleman waiting at the board, who uncovers them for the sewer, who tastes, again always, a fragment on a spoon, credence they call it, before the dish is set within the king's reach. You withdraw backwards, facing the chair, as you were taught, and in the 8 or 9 seconds this takes, 2 things print themselves on you forever. The first is the smell. Under the music and the candles and the roast fowl and the rose water, there is another smell in that warm small room, faint but total, the way a single wrong instrument is faint but total in a consort. It is sweetish, and it is wrong, and it is coming from under the table, from the bound and dressed leg propped there on a velvet stool, and every person in that room is pretending with their whole soul that it is not there. The second thing is his plate, because for all the 13 dishes, all the parade you've just walked in, the king is eating from one dish, with terrifying focus, and what is in front of him when you make your reverence is this, the marrow, great roasted marrow bones, split, and a little gold spoon going into the shafts of them, and the richest substance the animal kingdom offers going down the royal throat smooth as prayer, and beside it sweet wine, and beside that a dish of baked quinces in syrup drawing flies of candlelight. He eats like a man keeping an appointment. That is the thing you could not have known from any portrait, and it is the thing you will never manage to tell anyone in words that carry it. There is no gluttony to watch, no cartoon, no grease on the chin. There is a large, tired, magnificent, frightening man methodically loading a wound onto a fire, one gold spoonful at a time, with music playing. Outside in the passage your hands start to shake, which they had no leave to do inside, and so did not. Piers is at the dresser, checking covers back in. He looks at you once, reads the whole audience off your face the way Wendon reads a column, and hands you without a word the heel of a cheat loaf from the pantry basket. Servant's bread, your bread, honest and brown. You eat it right there, standing up in the cold passage with the kitchen thunder coming up the stairs, and no food in your life ever tasted more like safety. Well, Piers says at last, dry as ever, now you've seen England eat. Through November and into December you're worked into the rotation the way a new rope is worked into a well. Gradually under load, watched for fraying. Twice a week at first, then most days, you carry to the privy chamber at dinner or supper, and the room stops being a vision and becomes a workplace, which is its own kind of astonishment, that a man can be terrified in a place and bored in it on the same day. You learn its population. The gentlemen who wait on the king's person, men with names that open doors all over England, doing work your mother would recognise, pouring, carving, holding a basin while another man washes. That is the joke at the heart of this court, and nobody laughs at it because it is not a joke. It is the system. The higher your blood, the closer you may stand to the king's dinner, and men have spent fortunes and sold daughters to win the right to hand him a towel. The carver, who stands at the board and disassembles a swan with 2 instruments and no error, is a gentleman of an old house. The cupbearer is another, and the new queen, Catherine Parr, married to the king this past July in the chapel, not 200 paces from where you sleep, dines with him some days. And on those days the room is easier, the weather milder, the stories longer. She has a gift you can watch working, the gift of making an enormous, dangerous man feel like good company. You are less afraid on the Queen's days. Everyone is less afraid on the Queen's days, and no one says so because saying so would be to admit the other days exist. Let me show you one of the other days, because you cannot understand this table until you have stood in the room when the weather turns. It is a Friday in Advent, a fish day. And when I say fish day, I need you to understand that this is not deprivation as you know it. This is a fish day at the king's board. Pike in a high, sharp sauce, roast porpoise, whiting fried in the finest oil, a lamprey pie sent up from a West Country abbey that knows what side its bread is buttered, eels stewed in wine, salmon, crayfish, a tart of almond cream to close, because almonds are Lenten lawful, and the kitchen can do anything with an almond except make it stay a nut. 13 dishes with not an ounce of flesh meat among them, and the whole thing richer than a wedding. The king is in pain. You know the signs by now. The whole service knows them. The leg is propped higher than usual. The great face is the colour of tallow. The talk is short. The sauce for the pike comes up, and it is wrong. You will never learn what precisely was wrong with it. Too sharp, not sharp enough. some ghost of a taste that lived in his memory of how his father's cooks made it, who can say? But he takes one spoonful and stops, and the room stops with him. And then, without heat, in a voice of great quietness, which is the worst voice, he says a sentence about the man who made it. That is all. One sentence, to no one, into the air. What happens next is what you need to see. The sentence goes through the room and down the stairs like fire down a fuse. A gentleman murmurs to the sewer. The sewer is out the door. You hear the word travel down the service passage, losing softness as it descends through the ranks, until somewhere far below a master cook, a man with an office, a livery, and 20 years standing, a man who commands a boiling house the size of your parish church, is taken apart by the clerk of the kitchen in front of his own boys over a sauce because the king made a sentence. The dish comes down untasted. A fresh sauce goes up inside a quarter hour from a kitchen where, Joan tells you afterward, no one breathed while it was making. The king eats it without comment. Without comment is the good outcome. Without comment is what 100 and more men below stairs were praying for. And you stand at your place with the empty face Avely built you, holding a ewer, thinking a thought so dangerous you keep it in the marrow of your bones, where even you can barely hear it. All of this, the fuse, the fear, the ruined afternoon of a decent craftsman, ran downhill from the tongue of a man whose own physicians cannot get him to obey them on a single point. And everyone in this palace is more frightened of his palate than he is of his death. You are learning the true hierarchy of this house. It is not the one on Wendon's charts. At the top of this household there is not a king. There is an appetite, and it wears a king. It is Avely who gives you the words for it, in the way he gives you everything. Sideways, once, and never again. You're the last two in the little pantry after that Friday supper, you scouring the assay knives, him at the window with the shutter cracked, looking down at the dark kitchens where the fires are being raked for the night. And he says, not to you exactly. I carried at this board when he was 23, before your time, before most men's time now. You keep scouring, because you have learned that Avely's confidences are dear, move, and they're gone. You'd not credit it, he says, the handsomest prince in Christendom. I saw him wear out 8 horses in a day's hunting and dance that same night and eat like a boy. And it made you glad to bring him things. Glad. He'd thank you. He knew every man's name that served him, your county, your father's trade. The shutter clicks softly under his fingers. The leg was the end of that. The fall at the tilt, the year 36, he lay 2 hours without speech, and the legs never healed since, and a man who lived on his legs was told at 45 he'd not use them again as a man uses them. Everything since has gone into the one pleasure left. He closes the shutter. The room is just candle now. You'll hear men below stairs call him glutton. You'll say nothing, because it's treason, and because it's stupid. What you're watching isn't greed, boy. It's grief, with a good kitchen. The king eats, England watches, and God keep us all from outliving our own bodies. Then, as if the last minute had not occurred, the knives want oil. See to it. And he has gone down the passage with his lamp straight as a lance, and you stand in the little room with your rag and your dangerous new knowledge, listening to the palace settle around 600 sleeping servants and one sleepless king. Steady hands, empty face. You oil the knives. December brings the cold in earnest, and with the cold your first full taste of what winter service means. Frost flowers the inside of the garret window. You and Ned sleep in your clothes under one blanket and a shared cloak, spooned like knives in a case. And you stop being embarrassed about it by the second night because warmth outranks dignity everywhere on earth except books. You're up at 5. The fires in the king's rooms are lit hours before he wakes, and the grooms of the chamber carry the wood, and some mornings that is you, up the privy stair with a basket of split ash on your shoulder, quiet as guilt, laying fuel in the outer rooms while the king sleeps 2 doors away, and the yeomen at his door watch you with their halberds and their boredom. His rooms at night smell of wax, ambergris, the herbs strewn under the rush mats, and that other thing always faint, the sweetish note under everything, stronger in the mornings before the dressings are changed. Joan's women launder the bandaged linen, she told you once flatly, watching the lye steam. Burn's the only thing gets it out. We boil, we bleach, and Lord Lysel's shirts come whiter than that linen ever does. Then she looked at you in the way she has, half sergeant and half sister, and said, "He bears it, you know, whatever else he is, every day, and no wine takes it off past supper, and he gets up and is king again the next day. My first husband whined for a fortnight over a broke finger. It is the closest thing to tenderness anyone in this palace ever says about the man they all orbit, and it sticks in you like a burr because it is true and it changes nothing. You have begun to understand that both things live together here, the pity and the fear, married for life, like the smell of roses and the smell of the leg in that small golden room. That is the discovery of your first winter, the one you could never have made from Kent. Up close, nothing is simple. The tyrant suffers. The sufferer tyrannizes. The finest table in Christendom is a rack, and the man stretched on it built it himself, course by course, and calls it comfort, and will maim any man who serves the comfort wrong. Christmas comes to the palace like a fleet coming in. You feel it first in the cellars and the yards, days before you see a single sprig of holly, carts backed up at the gate from first light, barrels going down ramps with that boom that echoes in your breastbone, the woodyard growing a second woodyard beside itself, and Wendon's brethren standing in the cold with their tallies, counting, because Christmas is not a holiday in the counting house, it is a war. From St. Thomas's Day the household swells past 600 toward numbers nobody will tell you twice the same way. Lords riding in with their own trains, chaplains and choristers, minstrels, the households of the king's children folding into the great household like streams into a river. And that is a thing in itself this year of 1543. All 3 of the king's children under one roof for the season, the Lady Mary grown and grave, the Lady Elizabeth 10 years old and watching everything the way you watch everything, and the little prince, Edward, 6 years old, the whole future of England in a velvet cap, each with their own servers, their own tasters, their own small solemn copies of the ceremony you serve every day. Older men in the hall say it has scarce been seen. The 3 of them gathered so, and they credit the new queen for it, quietly, the way you credit good weather, grateful, and careful not to say it too loud in case it hears you and changes. And when I say the palace feasts for 12 days, I need you to understand what that means from underneath, because from underneath a feast is just work wearing a crown. The kitchens you will never enter go from a walking pace to a run on Christmas Eve and do not walk again until 12th night. Boars' heads come up the dresser gilded and wreathed in bay, with rosemary set in the sockets of their eyes. Brawn stands in collars of pastry, The hall eats beef and goose and pudding in the belly until the whole palace smells like one enormous dinner, and even your mess, even the groom's board, sees white bread on Christmas Day itself. Manchet, your one taste, a year of the king's own kind of loaf, and Ned holds his piece up to the candle like a jewel before he eats it, and says what Piers swears he says every year. So that's what it's like to be England. The chapel sings. The Gospels are carried about. You stand at the back of more ceremony in 12 days than Faversham sees in a decade, and your feet ache in a new way. A Christmas way, a standing on stone for 16 hours way, and you learn the feast day arithmetic of your trade. For every dish above, a shoulder below. The hall drinks wassail. You carry the wassail. That is the whole of Christmas, seen from your end of it, and you would not trade it, and you cannot feel your feet. On New Year's Day the court gives gifts, and this too is a liturgy with a ledger. The great ones give the king gold, cups, jewels, purses of coin, each entered on a roll by clerks at a trestle, weighed, valued, ranked. Because a gift at this court is not a kindness, it is a bid, and the roll is read the way merchants read prices. The king gives back plate, graded to the giver, and the whole exchange is as tender as a tax. But the current runs down as well as up, and this is the part nobody told you. On New Year's morning, the household rewards come down through the offices, coin for the officers, cloth for the yeomen, and for you, groom of the lowest water, a shilling, pressed into your palm by Mr. Avely with exactly the expression he wears for inspecting spoons, and you take it as gravely as it is given and go dizzy about your work, a shilling, a 40th of your year, dropped into your hand for being, as far as you can tell, adequately invisible for 3 months. That night Ned bites his and frowns at it, weighs it on one finger, holds it to the rushlight. Feels light, he says. You tell him it's the same shilling it ever was. He looks at it a moment longer and doesn't answer, and you will remember that little silence later, in 18 months or so, when the whole kingdom is frowning at its money. File it away. 12th night is the summit of the year, and the summit of 12th night is not the meat, it is the sugar. After the last course of the king's supper, when you think the table has finally emptied itself of possibilities, there is a whole further meal that has nothing to do with hunger, called the void, or, when it moves to its own room, the banquet, and it is made almost entirely of sugar and spice and wine. Hippocras first, wine mulled with cinnamon and ginger and grains of paradise, strained through a linen sleeve. Joan's office supplies the sleeve, and she will tell you with her flattest face that the spicery returns it stained like a battlefield, drunk warm with thin wafers so light they vanish on the tongue like frost. Then the comfits, caraway seeds and aniseeds and coriander, each one buried in a pearl of hard white sugar by some patient madman in the confectionery, served in little gilt dishes, eaten by the fistful. Suckets of orange peel and green ginger and syrup, from Portugal, from Venice, from further than you can spell. Marchpane, almond and sugar pounded to a paste, pressed into a great disc, iced, gilded, printed with devices, carried in like a shield of state because it is one, and above all, this 12th night. The subtlety. A castle of sugar paste 2 feet high, towers and battlements and little banners of wafer, the whole thing built in the confectionery over 4 days by men whose names you will never learn, borne up the room to the king's board while the consort plays, admired, applauded, and then broken and eaten, wall by the greatest people in England. and the king takes the keep. You stand at the cupboard with a ewer and watch the King of England eat a castle, and you think with the part of your head that is still a shepherd's son from the marshes, back home sugar is medicine. Your mother bought it by the ounce once from an apothecary in Faversham for your father's chest and locked it in a box. Wendon naturally has the numbers and gives them to you across the slate that week like a man dealing cards he disapproves of. Sugar comes in loaves, cone-shaped, wrapped in blue paper, up from the London grocers who bring it out of Antwerp, and it costs, depending on the whiteness, and whiteness is everything, up to 10p the pound and better. 10p. A labourer's 2 days for a pound of sweetness, and the spicery draws it by the loaf, by the dozen loaves for the season. The confectionery goes through it like a mason through mortar. It is physic, mind. The physicians say so. Sugar comforts the stomach, tempers the harsh humours, coats the throat. They prescribe it. They roll pills in it. They mean it. And the king loves it in the open way he loves few things left to him. The comfits by his hand at cards in the evening, the suckets, the sweet Greek wines, the quinces in syrup you have set before him 12 times already. Now, his teeth. I owe you honesty here, and the honest thing is this. The record keeps the king's menus, not his mouth. No document counts his teeth for us, and I will not invent an ache for him, though God knows the age would license it, for the age is just beginning to learn, in its sugared princes and merchant wives, what sweetness writes in the mouths of the rich. A generation on, travellers will note it of the English quality as a national mark, and the king's own younger daughter, in her old age on this very throne, will be famous across Europe for teeth gone black with sugar. That is documented. That is written down by a visitor who stood as close to her as you stand to the cupboard. So look at the board on 12th night, at the castle coming down wall by wall, and understand that you are watching the fashion at its spring. The whole shining habit that will darken the smiles of English greatness for a century, served warm with music as medicine. The poor of this kingdom keep their teeth because they cannot afford to lose them. It is the same joke as the bread. And nobody in the palace is laughing because nobody in the palace can see it yet. You can't either. You just carry the dishes. The physicians see more than most and can do least, and the chief of them is Dr. Butts. William Butts, the king's own physician these 20 years, a grave Norfolk man with a reforming turn of mind and the one quality that matters more at this court than learning, which is that the king likes him. Butts can say things to the king that would cost other men their places. Even so, watch what the saying is worth. The learned counsel is all there. You hear it second hand through Joan, through the grooms of the chamber, the way you hear everything. The leg would mend better if the body carried less. The wine feeds the humours that feed the sore. The sweet and the rich engender the very matter the surgeons spend their mornings drawing off. They know is the thing, not the way physicians 4 centuries on will know it, not with the right names for it, but by long looking they have seen the shape of it, and they say so in Latin carefully with their hats in their hands. And the king hears them the way Weather hears a sermon, and then doctors himself, because he is the king and a scholar, and has forgotten more physic than most of them ever grasped, or so he would tell you. This is real, and I want you to have it because it is the strangest, tenderest fact in this whole story. There survives a book of remedies from this court with the king's own devisings entered in it, plasters and ointments of his own invention, set down under his name the King's Majesty's own plaster, compounded to soothe the very leg his supper is killing. He built his rack, and then he sat up nights designing cushions for it. If you want to understand the man at the head of the table, hold those two things in one hand. The 13 dishes and the little pot of homemade ointment. Nobody in this palace calls that tragedy. There isn't a man below stairs who dare, and there isn't one who doesn't know it. And through all of it, at your elbow, the daily office goes on, small and dry as ever. On the last morning of the 12 days, with the greens coming down and the extra households packing to ride, Piers cuts the loaf, assays it, kisses the towel, and then stands a moment flexing his right hand, opening it and closing it against the cold, an old man's gesture, done without thought. He catches you watching. "Frost in the knuckles," he says. "It passes." Then, folding the towel a shade slower than usual, "Watch the whole of it, boy, not just your part. The cut, the taste, the kiss, the order of it. An office is a thing carried, same as a dish." He does not say why. He goes off down the passage with the pantry basket straight enough, and you stand there having been handed something and not knowing yet what it weighs. 12th night is over. The greens come down. The long grey stretch to Lent begins, and the palace folds itself back to its working size like a fist closing, and you are inside the fist, and it is your life now, and you notice it one cold morning with something like surprise. You are no longer new. The year 1544 comes into the palace through the food, because everything comes into this palace through the food. You know there is going to be a war with France before anyone tells you there is going to be a war with France, because Wendon's world tilts. New commissions posted, purveyors riding out in 2s and 3s, and down the river, London way. The talk is all of beeves and biscuit. An army eats before it marches, and it eats in numbers that make even the king's household look like a cottage. Thousands of quarters of wheat, salt beef by the last and the shipload, biscuit baked hard as roof tile in ovens working night shifts, beer brewed for soldiers by the 100-ton, because English soldiers will mutiny over water sooner than over pay. Wendon recites the requisitions the way he recites everything, flat. But you have learned to read the man under the psalms by now, and under these psalms the man is grim. Wars are eaten before they are fought, he says, chalk going. Remember that when the ballads come. Every ballad has a bakery behind it. And behind the bakery, something quieter that he does not explain, and you do not yet have the wit to ask about. The mint is busy too, that spring. New coin to pay for all of it. You will meet that coin properly next year, in your own palm, and so will everyone in England. Not yet. This spring it is just a rumour with milled edges. In May you see the armour. You're not meant to see anything. You're lent for a morning to help shift furniture in a gallery at Whitehall. Palace loaned to palace the way tools are loaned, and it happens that the Greenwich armourers have brought the king's new field harness up for a fitting, and there is an hour when it stands in an antechamber on its wooden tree with 2 of the armourers' men guarding it. In the bored way men guard things they have stopped seeing, and you carry a trestle past it 4 times, slower each time. It stands like the king, with the king poured out. Bright steel, whole acres of it, etched and gilt at the borders, jointed like a lobster, built at his own workshops by masters brought over from Almain and Italy a generation back. And it is vast. That is the only word your county has for it. The breast is a barrel. The backplate is a church door. The men who made it have done a beautiful, terrible, loyal thing. They have taken the truth, measured in linen tape at the royal body inch by inch, the girth of a man now 50-odd inches round the waist and growing, and they have declared it in steel and gold, polished it, made it glorious, because that is what armourers are for. A cuirass does not flatter. A cuirass is the one portrait painter the king cannot frighten. And here is what you think, standing there with your trestle, and it frightens you enough that you pick up your feet and stop passing. You have carried the dinners that are written in that steel, the Marrow, the Malmsey, the Quinces, the Castle at Twelfth Night. It is all in there, hammered bright, riveted, going to France to lead an army. 4 centuries from now that harness and its brothers from these same years will stand in glass cases, and men who cannot name one battle of this war will file past and read the waist off the steel. 54 inches, the labels will say near enough. And that is the number I gave you at the top of this story, and this is where it comes from. Not from gossip, from the armourer's honest tape. The kitchen wrote it. The armoury only published it. In July the king goes to his war. He should not. Every physician he has says so in whatever grammar of bowing each can manage, the leg being the leg and the summer being hot. And there is something in the going that even you, watching processions from the edge, can read plain. This is a man reaching back for the last time toward the prince Mr. Avely remembers, the one who wore out 8 horses in a day. He crosses to Calais in July with an army bigger than any England has sent out in living memory, and he takes his table with him, which is not a figure of speech. Officers of the mouth, cooks, purveyors, plate, tents, the whole liturgy folded up and shipped, because a king of England before Boulogne must dine like a king of England in a pavilion, off silver, with the assay performed in a field. Piers's opposite number goes. Piers past 60 does not, and says one sentence on the subject in your hearing. I have tasted for him in a tent before at Terouanne 30 years since. Young men's work. The knee will not kneel in mud twice in one life. So the palace empties of its head, and you learn what a body does when its head rides away. It keeps breathing, but softer. Because here is a thing you did not expect. The Queen keeps the table now, and the table changes temperature. Catherine Parr is named regent while the king is over the water. Regent with council and seal, the first queen to hold England in her hands in 30 years and more. And the ceremony you serve does not shrink an inch. Mark that, because ceremony is the crown, and the crown is in her keeping. The cloths laid, the salt set, the assay performed, the dishes counted up and counted down, the empty chair bowed to. Always the chair is never empty. But the weather in the rooms is other weather. The Queen dines abstemiously and talks books. The storms do not come. No sentence goes down the stairs like fire down a fuse. And in 11 weeks the only dish sent back is sent back with thanks and a request for the receipt. For the receipt, and you hear that a master cook below wept, which men below stairs will tell you is the first recorded case of a cook at this court, weeping for a good reason. You carry, you kneel, you withdraw, same as ever, and one evening you realise what the strange lightness in your shoulders is on the back stairs. You're not afraid. You had not known, until it lifted an inch, exactly how much fear you had been carrying up with every dish, folded under the cover, weighing more than the silver. Remember the weight. It is coming back on a ship. It is that quiet summer that finally takes you to the bottom of the chain. You have known since your first month where the top is. Now, one August evening, Mr. Avely details you to attend the almoner's men at the outer gate, and you carry down the voider, the great vessel of broken meats, the trimmed crusts, the carved from carcasses, everything the tables above have touched and left, and you see where the river of the king's provision finally reaches the sea. There is a crowd at the gate. There is a crowd at the gate every day of the year. You simply have never been on duty to see it. The licensed poor of the neighbourhood, old men, maimed men, women with children on their hips, standing in an order as fixed and fought over as the order of any procession you serve upstairs, each with a bowl or a cloth or a bare pair of hands, and at the front, by seniority of patience, a woman you will see at that gate in every season for the rest of this story, a widow, by her white cap, old or made old, with a wooden bowl polished dark by years of holding it out. The almoner's men portion the broken meat with perfect gravity, a ceremony at this end of the chain too, and into her bowl goes a wedge of pie the shape of a diocese, bread, a capon's carcass with half the meat still on it, food that was built for the finest table in Christendom, going into a wooden bowl at a gate, and she receives it the way Piers receives the loaf, formerly as a thing owed and honoured. She catches you staring, you in your livery holding the emptied voider like a fool at a font, and she says, not unkindly, in river English as broad as Jones, "His Grace keeps a good table, God hold him in health," and she means it. That is the sentence you chew on all the way back up the stairs. Wendon's river waters the realm exactly as he said. The arithmetic works. The beggars at the gate of this palace eat richer scraps than your father eats mutton, and the spring the river rises from is a wound in a small golden room, and God hold him in health is the economy of a whole gate crowd, a whole neighbourhood, said over a bowl. You put the voider away and go up to your garret and lie awake a while, listening to Ned breathe, doing a new kind of sum that Wendon never set you, and it will not balance, and you fall asleep before it does. Boulogne falls in the middle of September. The news comes up the river ahead of the king and breaks over London in bells. Every steeple in the city, hour on hour, bonfires in the streets, Te Deum sung, and reaches the palace as bells always do, first as sound, then as orders. The king has his city. He rode to the siege in his engine of steel, they say. He saw the walls come down, mined and battered through 6 weeks of a wet summer. He entered Boulogne at the head of his army with the trumpets going, and if you want to know what that meant to him, know that men who were there say he was merrier than he had been in 10 years. He comes home at the start of October, and the palace head is back on the palace body, and the fear comes up the stairs again, folded under the first dish cover of the first supper, right where you left it. But you see him at that supper, close, for the first time since midsummer, and the sum you could not balance at the gate gets a new figure carried into it. The face is greyer. The chair receives him more slowly, and the room pretends more loudly. The leg, Joan tells you flatly across her steaming kettles, is worse. The travel, the camp, the damp, 6 weeks in a tent being a king day and night, and the surgeon's linen tells her so every morning in language that boils. He took a city and it cost him a stone of whatever a man's remaining health is weighed in. And the table that greets the conqueror home is 13 dishes, and the sugar comes after, and the wine is Gascon, colour of garnets, the same, always the same. The king came home with the city in his pocket and winter in his leg. And this palace has only ever had one medicine to offer, and it sets it before him twice a day with music and he takes his physic like a good patient to the last spoonful, world without end. That second winter, your winter of 1544 into 1545, is the winter of small adjustments, and you are now senior enough to be the one making some of them. A joiner comes quietly one forenoon while the king is at council, and the great chair goes away on a handcart under a cloth, and comes back before supper under the same cloth, and if you set your hand to the frame, you do, once steadying it through the door, you can feel the new work. Fresh oak let into the old iron straps under the seat rails, discreet as surgery. Nobody ordered you not to notice, because nobody imagined noticing was possible. That is what the empty face is for. The footstool for the leg is rebuilt too, higher, broader, and Joan's office pads it. Fires are laid deeper in his rooms and lit earlier. The distances of the palace are quietly resurveyed by men like Aveley. Which galleries the king will use, which stairs he will not, where a chair may wait at the midpoint of a long walk as if by accident, cushioned, angled, deniable. And when I say deniable, I need you to understand that this is the actual work of the king's service now, the craft under the craft. Not the carrying of dishes, but the construction, every single day, of a world in which the King of England has merely chosen, again, freely, out of preference, to do the shorter thing. He has chosen to dine in the privy chamber. He has chosen the nearer gallery. He has chosen to take the air by barge and not on horseback, chosen the litter for the winter progresses, chosen. The whole household bends its back to keep one fiction upright, that the man is master of the body, and not the other way about. You are part of the fiction now. You hold its plates. In March he frightens everyone. A fever takes him, the leg again, the humours of it striking inward, the physician's phrase which even they say with their eyes somewhere else. And for some days the palace lives in the particular hush you will come to know too well, the hush of a great house listening through walls. Here is how you, a server, experience the mortal illness of a king through the bill of fare. You stand at the dresser, and the procession shrinks in front of you day by day, like ice going. 13 dishes become 7. 7 become 3. 3 become a broth, a caudle, a posset of almond milk, manchet toasted and soaked in wine. Invalid food, nursery food, going up under the same silver, with the same assay, the same bows, the same music now played softer to an inner room, because the ceremony does not sicken even when the man does. The chair is never empty. And Wendon. This is the fortnight you truly learn what Wendon is. Wendon enters it all, day by day, in the same even hand, because the book must be true whatever else fails. And one afternoon in the counting-house passage he lets you read the page, and does not say a word while you take it in. The kingdom's fear ruled and totted, dinner, one broth. You had heard men say the king's death would be the end of the world, and mark this, for it is a true fact of this reign, and not a figure. To speak of, to even imagine the king's death is treason by statute. Men have died for words no heavier than a wish, and so nobody speaks of it, anywhere, and the whole terror of March 1545 exists officially nowhere in England except here, in the thinness of a column of dishes in a clerk's book. Remember this page. I told you once a page would speak before the physicians did. This is not that page. This is its rehearsal. Then the fever breaks. The column thickens day by day, capon, then mutton, then the game, then the marrow again, God help him. And by Lady Day the full 13 stand at the dresser like soldiers returned, and the palace exhales, and the bells of the chapel sound to you, that Easter, like a man whistling past a churchyard he now knows the way to. That summer the French come to pay the visit back, not to the palace, to the sea. Through July the talk runs up the river with every tide. A French fleet in the Channel, hundreds of sail, the biggest armada anyone can remember, come to burn the south coast and take the Isle of Wight, while the king's army sits in his expensive new city of Boulogne. And the king rides down to Portsmouth to see his own fleet meet them, and dines. The reports come back precise about this because of what happened after. Dines aboard his great flagship among his admirals, off ship's plate in a great cabin, the table following him even onto the water, the assay performed on the Solent, and the next day, the 19th of July, standing on the shore with his court about him, near enough to see it all with his own eyes, he watches the Mary Rose, his ship, 35 years his ship, rebuilt and regunned and loaded with 500 men, heel over in a breath of wind and go down in minutes, in home water, in sight of her own harbour, with her nets rigged against boarders, so that the men beneath them had no more chance than fish under ice. Fewer than 40 come out alive. The Vice-Admiral is not one of them. His lady stood beside the king and watched the ship take her husband down, and the king himself, this is recorded, turned and comforted her, while the water was still ringed. You are not at Portsmouth. You are here in the emptied summer palace, and the news arrives the way news arrives at your level. A rider's horse blown in the base court at evening, then the yeoman's faces at the gate, then Joan, who has waterman's kin down every reach of this river, standing in the Uri doorway, telling it flat and quiet with her hands still full of linen. 500 men, chick, under the nets, and the whole service yard going silent in rings around her, like the water. It is a few evenings after that, with the palace still carrying the Solent in its stomach, that Joan takes you up onto the leads. She has linen drying up there over the great hall roof, has keys and rights of passage you never question, and perhaps she reads your face at supper, prescribes for it, because what she says is, "Come up, chick, I'll show you something better than sitting." And you climb the dark stair behind her, and come out on the roof of the world. You have never in your life been higher than a hayloft. Below you the whole palace lies open like one of Wendon's books. The courts in their order, the base court crawling small with people, the gardens ruled and knotted, the kitchens declaring themselves plainly at last. You can see every chimney of the 55 rooms you will never enter, breathing smoke in a long grey rank, cooking supper for 600 while you watch. And beyond the wall, the river. The Thames going down loop by silver loop through the meadows toward London, and on it, even now, even at evening, the barges, wine coming up, wood coming up, the endless provision moving on the water, the artery feeding the mouth you serve. From up here you can see the whole animal at once, gate, yard, kitchen, hall, chamber, chapel, and somewhere under that far roof, a man with a bad leg whom all of it exists to feed, and you are one soul of the 600, one pair of hands of the 1200 hands, barely a cog in one wheel of it. But you're here, you're in it. The machine feeds you too. Joan stands beside you with her forearms on the parapet, looking not at the palace but at the water, and after a while she says her lesson, the one you will keep. My first husband drowned off Bermondsey, did I ever tell you? Werry man, same river that fed us. Rivers feed and rivers drown, chick, and it's the same water, and there's no sense asking it to be sorry. She straightens up and begins to gather her dry linen off the lines, and hands you an end to fold, because in Joan's church grief and work share a pew, and you fold linen on the roof of England while the light goes, and it is, though you have no way to know it, the evening you will remember when you are old. Not a feast, not a horror, just the folding and the smoke going up in a rank, and the same water. The war ends the way wars end now, not with a battle, but with an exhaustion. And what it leaves behind in England, it leaves in the money, and the money is where your Ned finally meets his cliff. The new coin is general by that autumn, the autumn of 1545, and everyone has learned what Ned's thumb knew on New Year's night. The king's shilling is not what the king's shilling was. This silver is cut with copper, openly now, issue after issue, because 2 wars has been paid for out of the mint. The French war and the Scottish war and the fortifications and all of it, eaten, as Wendon said before it was fought. And prices know it. Prices always know it first. Wheat is up and up again. The London bakers howl. Wendon stands in the counting-house passage holding a fistful of new testoons like a man holding bad fish, and delivers the flattest heresy you ever hear from him, in arithmetic, which is the only tongue he trusts. The penny buys less because the penny is less. That is the whole mystery. They will hang men in the markets for prices this winter, and the prices were minted. And the board of green cloth, squeezed like every board in England, begins to squeeze in its turn. Close accounts, tighter books, the broken meat stole weighed where it was formerly heaped, checkers at the gates on delivery days. Which is precisely, exactly, the wrong season for what Ned Purse has been doing. Because you know now, you have known since a dusk in September, when you came the back way from the woodyard and saw him at the water stairs with a rush basket going into a wherry, and the wherryman's boy handing coins up, quick, both of them easy with it, practised. Capons that a spoon has been through once, half custards, the bishop's living he joked about in your first week, 3 years of jokes ago. It stopped being talk somewhere in the middle, just as you filed away that it might, and it goes downriver to an alewife in Kingston twice a week, and Ned's mother's rent in Cheapside gets paid, and the table wants for nothing, because the table always wants for nothing, and it is theft from the king's house in a year when clerks are counting crusts. You have it out with him once, in the garret, whispering because of the other 2 grooms, the nearest thing to a quarrel you 2 ever have. He doesn't even defend it as not theft. He's cleverer than that, and angrier. The voider feeds the gate widows, and that's holy, he says. It feeds the almoner's own pig too, and that's custom. It goes down 100 throats between the board and the gate, and every throat above mine is called a perquisite, and mine is called a felony. Draw me the line, Roland. Draw it. And you can't, is the truth of it. Wendon himself could not chalk that line. But you know something Ned's anger won't let him know, which is that lines at this court are not drawn. They are dropped, from above, suddenly, on whoever is standing in the wrong place when the counting tightens. The books are getting truer, is all you can say. Be less interesting. He laughs at that, short, and turns over and does not stop. And in November, Dr. Butt dies. Not the king, the physician. Mark how strange it is that all England, hearing hoofbeats that month, thought first of the master, and it was the good servant taken. A fever ends him at his house in the cold of the month, and the news goes through the palace with a weight that tells you what he had been. The king grieves, plainly, humanly, those who saw it say so, and below stairs the older men grieve after their own fashion, which is to calculate. Piers puts it in 6 words, cutting the morning loaf. Now who tells him anything? Because that was the office under the office, you understand now. 20 years, the one man in England who could stand at the royal elbow and say the word less, and be heard even to the extent he was heard, which was little, but little is not nothing, and now it is nothing. The learned men who remain are able men, worthy men, and every one of them bows an inch lower than butts bowed, and after butts no one is left in this kingdom who can make the king hear the word less. The table felt it before the court did. You'd swear the dishes came up heavier that winter, you'd swear the wine went round quicker, and the leg, but you know about the leg. Everyone knows about the leg. It is the open secret at the centre of England now, the thing the whole shining ceremony is built around the way a pearl is built around its grain of grit, except that a pearl heels its grit over, and this grit is winning. The third winter is the winter the walking fails. Not all at once. Nothing about this man happens all at once. He is a kingdom, and kingdoms fall by inches. But that winter, the winter of 1545 into 1546, is when the distance Joan told you about in your third week, the distance from the bed to the chair that he can do like a king, shrinks at last to nothing at all on the bad days, and the household does what this household does with every unbearable truth. It builds furniture around it. 2 new chairs appear in the king's lodgings that season, and they will still be there, entered in the great inventory clerks will make of everything he owned when all of this is over. Chairs made to carry with staves quilted and covered in tawny velvet, cushioned like thrones and built like litters, and the men of the chamber have a plain word for them, trams, and in the plainness of the word you can hear the whole doctrine of the service. Give the terrible thing a workaday name and it becomes work, and work can be done. On the bad days, the strongest of the chamber staff carry the King of England from his bedchamber to his dining chamber in a velvet tram, and there is machinery for the stairs when the stairs cannot be avoided, and none of it is ever seen by one eye that does not draw the king's wages. Averley redraws the service like a general redrawing a defence. Which doors stand open in advance so the tram never waits, which passages are cleared and by whom, where you and your fellows stand, faces to the wall, understand, at the sound of the staves, not out of shame but out of statecraft, because what no man sees, no man can report, and what no ambassador hears is that the King of England cannot walk to his dinner, and the dinner itself does not shrink by one dish. I want you to hold that in your mind's hand, and feel the weight of it. The table is now the last country where he is wholly king. Horse, tennis, the tilt, the dance, the long strides through his own galleries with the whole court trotting, gone one by one over 10 years, each loss buried politely under a chosen to. What remains sovereign is the board. The 13 dishes are no longer even a statement to England. They are a statement to the body. I still command. So the dish goes up, and the dish comes down, and some evenings now it comes down barely touched, and Wendon's column has begun, very quietly, to tell its long story to anyone with the eyes. The entries full as ever at the top, the consumption thinning under them, provision and appetite pulling slowly apart like a seam going. The ceremony is eating the meal now. You carry for a rite. You'd thought once, Greenly, that the table was a meal. Piers could have told you the first morning. It was always the rite that was fed. Ned is caught on a Thursday in February. Not the water stairs, in the books, which is worse, because the books are Greencloth's own ground. A checker at the gate on a delivery morning, a count of capons carried against capons served, a shortfall small as a farthing and steady as a heartbeat, week over week. and clerks are the hounds God built for exactly that scent. They take him up to the counting-house before dinner, and the word goes through the offices the way fear goes, instantly and without any visible messenger, and you stand at the dresser that noon carrying dishes with your empty face over a chest full of hammering, because you have known since September, and at this court knowing is a cargo. What saves Ned Purse? You piece this together after, from Joan, from Piers, from the shape of the silences, is three things. The first is Wendon, who, having found the leak, is the man asked to size it, and who sizes it precisely, which is to say honestly, which is to say small, pilfered broken meats, customs grey border crossed, no plate touched, no purse, no conspiracy, a groom's greed, and not a knave's. The second is Mr. Avely, who goes up to the green cloth unasked and stands for his own, not for Ned's innocence. He would sooner lie about the weather to God, but for the household's right to mend the household, and Avely's word at that board is worth what 30 unblemished years are worth. And the third is the times themselves by a strange mercy. With the books tightening everywhere, the officers want quiet corrections, not a Marshalsea matter bruited about the county to tell the world the King's own house leaks. So the line is dropped, and it is dropped just short of Ned's neck. He loses the chamber, broken to the woodyard and the scullery court for a year and a day, wages docked to the bone, the livery coat taken back, and you learn what a coat is when you watch a man uncoated. He stands in the passage in his shirt like something shelled, and Piers, watching from the pantry door, says the only epitaph the affair ever gets below stairs. Cheap. If the world were run by clerks like Wendon, mercy would be general, for they hate waste. That night the garret is one man lighter, and you cannot sleep for the quiet. Ned is not gone. You will see him daily, hauling billets in the cold with his ears red, and by summer you two will have rebuilt something across the gap, plainer than before and maybe truer. But the lesson lies on you all season like a stone, and it is not the lesson the green cloth intended. "Draw me the line," he said, and you saw where the line fell and who it fell from, and that it was dropped with mercy this time because clever men chose mercy, and that nothing about the line itself would have minded falling harder. You're a servant in a great house. The house is warm. The house is fed. The house is just mostly when it suits the house. Steady hands, empty face. You get up in the dark and go down and hold the towel. And it is that same February, the seam of it, frost still on the garret glass, that the office comes to you. Piers's hand has been telling him something all winter that his face refuses to repeat. The frost in the knuckles has stopped passing. And on a black Friday morning, with the palace still half asleep, the loaf on the board and the knife laid by, he does not pick up the knife. He stand a moment, both hands flat on the board like a priest at an altar, and then he steps back, one full step, the way a man steps back from a plough at the end of the last furrow, and says, "Show me the whole of it. Cut, taste, kiss, go on." And so it is you. Your hands on the knife, and the crust parting with that held breath sound you have heard 400 mornings and never once made yourself. The paring, the trimming, and then the piece on your tongue. You eat the king's bread. Stop and see yourself, because I promised you at the start of this story that its title was true in a quieter way than you feared, and here is the whole truth of it, standing in a cold pantry in livery. In 3 winters and more under this roof, through feasts that emptied counties, you have never once eaten what King Henry eats. No server has, no groom, no usher. The men who refuse his food refuse it because it is not theirs to touch, because between their mouths and that glory stands the whole iron order of the world, and the single solitary exception, the one mouthful of the king's own man-cheat a low man may lawfully take, is this one, the taster's morsel, the assay, the bite that is not eating at all but hazard, chewed slowly, attentively for the poison in it. The only man who shares the king's bread is the man testing it for death. You chew. You listen to it the way Piers taught you without ever saying he was teaching, for wrongness, for bitterness under the wheat, for the wrong note in the choir. And it is sweet and clean, and it is the best bread baked in England, and your heart is going like a drum, and nothing happens, which is the whole of the office, a lifetime of nothing happening staked fresh every morning. You swallow, you nod, you kiss the towel, Joan's linen laundered to snow, and the bread is the king's bread now, sealed, and Piers watches the whole rite with his ruined hands folded, and what he says is not praise. Piers has never praised bread or boys in his life. He says, slower on the kiss, it's not a wench, it's a warrant. And then he says, again tomorrow, and turns to the baskets, and that is how you become, at 21, an assayer of the king's mouth, in the last year of the king's life. Peace comes with the summer, and it comes, of course it comes, everything comes, as food. The war has bankrupted both crowns. The new coin has told everyone as much in their own palms, and through the spring the couriers thicken between London and Paris until in June it is done, signed, sworn, peace between England and France, Boulogne to stay English for 8 years, and then go home for a ransom. Honour saved all round at a price no honest clerk can write without wincing. The bells again. You have learned to read this kingdom by its bells. They are its pulse at a wrist. And hard behind the bells, the order that turns the whole palace on its axis and points it at August. The Admiral of France is coming to England to swear the peace in the king's own chapel, with a train of hundreds, and he is to be feasted at Hampton Court. And when I say feasted, when this court says feasted, at the end of this reign, with the honour of the peace riding on it, the palace begins, that very week, to build. Timber comes up the river, banqueting houses rise in the park, whole pavilions born in a month, hung inside with tapestry and set with cupboards. The jewel house disgorges. The offices are mustered and drilled like bands before a battle. The kitchens below, you hear it through the hatch, through the floor, through the soles of your feet. Begin the long, provisioning roar that will not stop now until September. Avely walks the service routes with his staff like a man pacing a field. He means to defend to the death, and Wendon's slate fills with figures that would have made the boy you were laugh out loud in disbelief, and even Piers stands a little straighter over the loaf. One more time, the palace is saying with every plank and pot, one more time at full glory before the world changes. Nobody says the last part aloud. The palace has one great feast left in it. So does the king. Only one of them knows it, and it is not the king, and it is not the palace either. It is nobody. Hold that. We are almost there. The Admiral of France comes up the Thames at the end of August 1546 the way majesty travels, when two kingdoms have agreed to be friends and both want the other to feel the cost of it. In galleys, with a train of gentlemen by the hundred, saluted by the guns of the Tower so that the whole city stands in its doorways, feasted through London and then out along the road to Hampton Court, and on the heath the Prince of Wales rides to meet him. Edward, 8 years old, going 9, on horseback, at the head of 1,000 horse, gentlemen in velvet and cloth of gold behind him like a field in armour, and the little prince makes the admiral a speech of welcome in French, and embraces him, and the hard-handed old sailor, Claude d'Annebaut, Admiral of France, a man who a summer ago was burning the Isle of Wight, is charmed clean out of his boots, and says so, and the reports of it run ahead to the palace, and even the scalding houseboys repeat it grinning. That is the shape of the thing, and you should see the shape before we go behind the chair. 2 old lions who have beggared themselves biting each other, now leaning together in the sun and calling it love, and a child in cloth of gold riding out from the future to bid the past welcome. The whole visit is a dish, if you like. The whole visit is the greatest dish this kitchen ever sent up, and for 10 days the palace, you know, disappears into it. And when I say 10 days, I need you to understand what 10 days of state feasting means to the 200 men below the dresser and the 200 above it, because the chronicles will keep the tapestries and lose the labour. The banqueting houses in the park stand finished, hung with arras that would ransom towns, and in the palace the cupboards are dressed, tier over tier of gold and silver-gilt plate, basins, ewers, standing cups, the wealth of the jewel house marshalled in pyramids, whose entire office is to stand there and glitter and say, wordlessly to France, "We are not tired, we are not poor, look." Every dish of every course for the king's board and the admiral's is essayed, every cup. The poison liturgy runs at double strength for the guest's honour and the realm's safety, and you are in it now, one of the mouths the kingdom trusts, tasting bread in the grey of each morning, with your heart long since taught to keep quiet about it. The service musters before each dinner like a watch before battle, avely down the line, straightening a shoulder here, a napkin there, no speech, none needed, 30 years of mornings in his walk, peers at the pantry, past carrying now, checking each loaf out of the baskets like a captain telling over his men. Joan's ewery running white hot, the diaper cloths, the surnap, the basins for the rose water going up before and after every course, because the fingers of France must want for nothing. Ned in the woodyard feeding the fires of the ovens that feed the fires of the feast, his year and a day served in the engine room of the glory, Wendon at his book, entering it all, and the figures for these 10 days will survive in their kind, and clerks unborn will whistle at them. The palace at full stretch, every soul of 600 pulling one way and riding on top of it, like a crown set on an ox. The point of it all, 1 table, 2 old men, 13 dishes, peace. You are behind his chair for the great banquet, not by favour, by rotation and Darvley's cold arithmetic of who can stand 4 hours without swaying, and keep an empty face at a yard's distance from 2 kings' worth of majesty. But you are there, at the wall, in the candle blaze, with a surnap over your arm, close enough to serve the cupboard to sign. And this is what the last great feast of the reign looks like from the one place in England no chronicler stood. The banqueting house glows like the inside of a lantern, hundreds of wax lights, the arras stirring very slightly in the heat of them so that the woven horsemen seem to breathe, the consort playing, the long boards below the dais banked with the French in their court silks, and the English in theirs, the noise of 2 languages laughing rising together into the roof. The courses come up in processions longer than any you have ever walked in, covered silver 2 by 2 by 2, swan and crane and quail, venison in frumenti, sturgeon, peacock redressed in its own burning green feathers, the cooks below outdoing their own fathers, and at the head of it all, under the cloth of estate, in a gown so thick with goldsmith's work that it has its own light, is the king, your king. 3 years you have watched this man across dishes, and you know the cost ledger of him the way Wendon knows the other kind, and so you see what France is not meant to see, and to its honour or its diplomacy does not, that the great voice is working harder for its carry, that the leg is bricked up under the board on cushions Joan's women stitched a week ago, that between the courses, in the trough of the music, the whole vast frame settles by some fraction of an inch, as a house settles, and gathers again when the next dish is announced. He is magnificent. That's not flattery. It is the plain report of your own eyes. He talks. He laughs the laugh that pulls the room after it. He feeds the admiral choice morsels off his own dishes with his own beautiful hands, the mark of highest favour, meat from the king's plate. And when he rises at the last, he rises leaning on the admiral's shoulder, so the reports say, and so you see. And he makes even that a favour, even his need he spends like largesse, the old lion making the young piece carry him, and the whole room takes it as it is offered, as grace, and the sugar castle comes in, the one I promised you at the very top of this story, an age of nights ago, borne by 4 men on a bier of gilt wood, a fortress of sugar paste and marchpane the size of a cradle. Towers, curtain wall, portcullis of spun sugar, and over its gate the royal arms of England done in gilded almond paste, leopards and lilies burning in the candlelight. The lilies of France quartered there these 200 years, market on a castle of sugar at a feast for France. And the room stands to applaud it, and the king takes his knife and opens the wall of it himself, and France and England eat a castle together, laughing while the trumpets sound. You stand at the wall with your cloth on your arm and your face empty and your heart, without any leave from you at all, full, because it is beautiful. That is the thing the horror never cancels and the pity never cancels. It is the most beautiful thing you will see in your life, and you are in it. You are one of its bones, and no one will ever know your name, and just this once, in the blaze and the music, that seems to you not an injustice but a kind of secret, like being one of the stones under a cathedral. 10 days, this, hunting by day for those who can hunt, masks and dancing by night for those who can dance, and the fool earning his bread through all of it. The king's own fool, who has licence no other man in England has, and who worked that summer harder than any man in this palace save the cooks. But the fool's summer is its own story, and this channel has told it on its own night, and I'll not steal his thunder here. Know only that when the king laughed those 10 evenings, really laughed, it was most often the fool who bought it for him, and there were men at the wall with surnaps over their arms who could have kissed him for it. You do not yet know. Nobody in that shining room knows. Not the king, not the admiral, not the child in cloth of gold, not one soul of the 600 sweating below. That this is the end. Not an end. The end. The last great feast of the reign of King Henry VIII. The last time the full glory is ever mustered around that chair with the man himself upright in it, gowned and jewelled and laughing at the head of his own table. The peace is sworn in the chapel royal with the admiral's hand in the king's. The treaties are sealed. There is even talk between the 2 old men, wine-warmed and vast, of setting both kingdoms' churches to rights together, the kind of talk that vanishes with the candle smoke, and then it is over, the way the greatest days are over, all at once from underneath. The French ride for the coast with their gifts. The banqueting houses stand empty in the September wind with dead flowers in them, and candle stubs by the basketful, and the arras comes down, and the plate goes back to the jewel house piece by counted piece, and Jones Ury spends a solid week boiling the linen of the glory back to plain white, and Wendon rules a line under the 10 days and carries the sum. It took 10 days to feast France. It took near a fortnight to wash it. And the king goes indoors, into the autumn, into the shortening light, and you will only see this looking back, the way you see the shape of a wave from the shore, in some way that no one marked at the time, because there was nothing to mark, no fall, no cry, no sentence into the air. He never really comes out again. The autumn goes down quietly, and the palace goes down with it, room by room, into the smaller world of a sick man's winter. Understand that no one says sick. No one will ever say sick. The word is not in the household's mouth because it cannot be. What happens instead is that the world contracts by choices, the way it has contracted for years, only faster now and further. The court moves with the season, Windsor, London, and by December the king is settled at Whitehall, and the circles around him tighten like water going down. Fewer audiences, fewer faces, the council men coming and going with their locked-door looks, the privy chamber gentlemen standing higher in the world every week, for the plain reason that fewer and fewer men see the king at all, and they do. The great public ceremonies thin. The dinners do not hold to the table. We're holding to it to the end. It is our lane through this story, and it will carry us all the way. The dinners do not thin, and that is the whole strange grief of that autumn from where you stand. The bills of fare come down to the offices full. The processions form, the assay is made. Your mouth, most mornings now, your morsel, your listening chew, your kiss on the linen. The covered silver goes up at the hours appointed, with the ushers and the bows and the music at the door, the full liturgy of 13 dishes, to rooms that fewer and fewer men enter, and it comes back. That is what the dresser knows that the proclamations never will. It comes back too heavy. You lift the covers off the returning dishes to check the plate back in, and the swan has been turned, not carved. The frumenti tried, a spoon's edge, no more. The marrow, his marrow, the appetite you watched 3 years ago going down smooth as prayer with a gold spoon. The marrow bones come back whole. Wendon's page. I told you, an age of nights ago, that a day was coming in a cold season when that ruled page would say something, before any physician said it aloud, and this is the season, and it says it every day now, in the mildest hand in England. Provision, 13 dishes, consumed, and then the thinning entries, the crossed nothings, the clerk's neat marks that mean, when you stack up a fortnight of them together in the candlelight of the counting-house passage, the King of England is not eating. Wendon stands beside you while you read it. He rules nothing under it, adds no comment. The book does not editorialize. The book is the truest courtier of them all. But he says in that flat psalm voice, looking at the column and not at you, I have kept this book, man and boy, through 4 queens, 3 wars, and the fall of the monasteries. It was never once the loudest thing in the palace till now. And he closes the cover, soft, the way you'd close a door on someone sleeping. Christmas comes, and for the first time in your service, for the first time in the memory of men twice your age, the court does not really keep it. The Queen is sent with her ladies to Greenwich for the season. The little princes at Hertford. The palaces of the children keep their Christmases apart, and at Whitehall the great hall stands dark on nights. It was never dark, and there is no boar's head borne up to trumpets, no wassail crowd, no castle of sugar. no fool's thunder rolling down the galleries, only the working dinners of a working council, and the full silent liturgy going up twice a day to the shut rooms. They tell the Queen it is for the season's ailments, the winter rooms. They tell the ambassadors the King is indisposed and merry. They tell the household nothing at all, and the household, wiser than all of them, sets its face and serves. You keep the feast below stairs, such as it is. The hall mess gets its Christmas beef and its double ale, and Joan brings up from some private hoard a dish of roasted apples with cinnamon, real cinnamon, from the specerie's sweepings or an honest bribe, and you and she and Piers and Ned restored that very month to the chamber service. The last weeks of his sentence quietly forgiven, on Averley's word, mercy proving cheap a second time, his coat new on his back and his tongue a whole winter quieter than the boy you first shared a bed with. The four of you eat them hot with your fingers in the Uri by candlelight, and nobody says what everybody is thinking, and it is, in its stolen sideways, downstairs fashion, the truest Christmas dinner kept in any palace in England that year. Twelfth night passes without a subtlety. In the confectionery nothing is built. That is how you would put it in a chronicle, if servants kept chronicles. In the 12th year of nothing was built, and the sugar slept in its blue paper, and the greatest table on earth stood laid and lit and waiting, and no one came. January is doors. That is how you will remember it all your life. A month made entirely of doors. Doors shut that were never shut. Doors guarded that were never guarded. Doors you had walked through freely for 3 years now closed to all but a dozen faces in the kingdom. And behind the last of them, the innermost, the room you will never see again, the man. What comes out to you, at the dresser, in the passages, is the residue of what is happening within, and you read it like Joan reads linen, like Wendon reads columns, because reading residue is the whole literacy of the service. The physicians' comings thicken, their faces going in composed and coming out old. There is cautery that month. The surgeon's irons go in wrapped like relics and come out wrapped like shame. And the smell in the near galleries on the worst morning is one your nose knows from the fairs at home, from the farriers, and your mind slams a door of its own on the knowledge of what it means that it should be here. The trays, for it is trays now, not processions. Somewhere in the turn of the year even the liturgy bows at last, and the 13 dishes yield to broths and caudles and the invalids' manchet sops, carried up by the gentlemen themselves. The trays come down untouched and then barely touched, and then there is a day, late in the month, when the kitchen sends up almost nothing at all, and the almost nothing comes back, and the palace holds its breath so long it forgets it is holding it, and the fiction, the great fiction you have served since you were 19, the king has chosen, the king is master of the body, stands all that month like a wall with the sea behind it, and on the 28th day of January in the small hours, in the innermost room, with an archbishop holding his hand because by then he was past speech and could answer the last question of his life, only with a grip of the fingers. The sea comes over the wall. The king is dead. You do not know it. That is the point of everything that happens next, and it is why I have brought you all this long way, because what happens next is the strangest thing in this whole story, and it happened at your station and almost nowhere else in the world. For 3 days the dead king dines. Hold still and let me say it plainly, because it is documented, it is sworn to, it is in the ambassador's dispatches and the council's own craft. The death is hidden. 3 days and more, while letters go softly out, and the new reign is rigged behind shut doors like a ship fitted in the dark. The little prince to be secured, the will, the council of regency, the whole future of England balanced on a knife of hours. And for those 3 days, Whitehall performs the king alive, and the performance has exactly one great public instrument, and it is yours, the table. The meals go up, at the accustomed hours, with the accustomed state, the trumpets sounding before the procession, as they have sounded before the king's meat all his reign. The covered dishes are borne through the galleries to the royal lodgings, the ushers bowing, the yeomen at their doors, every man of the service walking his appointed walk, to a shut chamber, where a great body lies cooling under its pall, and officers receive the dishes at the threshold with grave faces, and within the accustomed time the dishes come out again and go back down to be discharged in the books. The dish goes up, the dish comes down. 4 years you have said that sentence to yourself, your rope across every strangeness this place could offer, and here at the end the sentence is all that is left. The man is gone, and the right walks on without him for 3 whole days, upright, sounding its trumpets, like armour standing with the king poured out. You carry on the 2nd day. I will not pretend you knew. The concealment was real concealment. Grooms were told nothing. You knew what the dresser knew, which was that the food came back stone cold and stone whole, and that the gentlemen at the door had faces like the church floor. But your hands knew. That is the truth of the service, and you may have it whole. The weight was the same, the walk was the same, the bow was the same, and somewhere between the lifting and the setting down, your hands, schooled past your own understanding by 400 mornings of this house, understood that they were carrying dinner to no one, and were part of a rite of state older and stranger than mourning, and they did not shake. Steady hands, empty face. You served the crown of England for 3 days after the man who wore it had no more need of servants, and when it was at last cried in the streets, the 28th secret published on the last day of January, the child proclaimed, the bells of every steeple beginning the slow iron spelling out that even the gate beggars could read. You were at the dresser checking silver, and you put down the count and stood still amid 600 people standing still, and the palace made a sound you never heard before nor since. Nothing. A whole world of service stopped between one task and the next, listening to the bells say, finished. Grief in a great household is not like grief in a family, and it is not nothing either. It is grief distributed the way everything here is distributed down chains by office. The Uri grieves in linen. On the first morning of the new world you pass Joan's doorway, and she is standing over her great kettle with a bundle in her arms. The bandaged linen, the endless linen, boiled and bleached and boiled these 4 years and never once come white. And there is no more of it to boil. And she is standing quite still, and you go on past and leave her stillness, because you understand now what you could not have understood at 19, that a woman can scrub a man's suffering out of cloth twice a week for years and be, in her own cross-grained, unsayable way, the truest mourner he has. The pantry grieves in bread. Piers has the morning loaf on the board when the order comes down that changes the form of words. The king's bread now means a 9-year-old boy at Hertford, and he stands over the manchet with the knife in his ruined hand a long moment and then cuts, because the office does not stop. The office never stops. Offices are how the world outlives its men. But he cuts slower that morning, with a kind of state, and you hold the towel and do not hurry him. And Mr. Evely, on the day the household is sworn over to the new reign, You pass the door of the emptied privy chamber at Whitehall, and Avely is within, alone, seeing to the removal of the plate. And as he leaves the room, he stops in the doorway and turns and bows to the empty chair. Full and slow, the reverence of 30 years, to a vacant seat and a cloth of estate already half unhung. The chair is never empty, he told you once. Your third week, when you were green enough to nearly laugh. You stand in the passage with your arms full of counted silver and watch the straightest back in England bend to nobody, to everybody, to 3 reigns and his own life, and you do not nearly laugh. It is the single most instructive thing you ever see at court, and like everything Avely ever taught you, it is done once, sideways, and never explained. They bury him in the middle of February, and the burying is the last great service of the reign, and the greatest procession any of you ever mounted. 4 miles of it on the winter roads, the chariot with the coffin under cloth of gold, and lying upon the coffin, dressed and crowned and sceptred, a wax image of the king made to the life, the great face, the very rings, so that England sees its king ride to his grave the way it saw him ride everywhere, whole and glorious and above the weather. Even now, even dead, the fiction is upheld, and you, who spent 4 years upholding it with dishes, can read that effigy like your own trade's signature. The first night on the road, the coffin rests in the church at Sion, and men told stories afterward about that night at Sion, dark ones, fitting ones, and the record keeps its mouth shut about them. And so, tonight, will I... This channel deals in what the documents hold, and what they hold is solemn enough. The masses sung, the watch kept, the torches, the cold. And the second day to Windsor, and there, in St. George's Chapel, in the choir, in a vault beside the Queen who gave him his son, Jane, 10 years waiting for him under the stone, the King of England is let down into the earth. And here is the detail I have carried this whole story for you to receive at the end, the one I would not trade for all the Chronicle's trumpets. It took 16 strong yeomen of the guard to lower that vast coffin, and they lowered it with linen towels, 5 great towels of the household's own weaving, passed under the weight, paid out hand over hand, the plain servant's cloth of the plain servant's trade, Joan's trade, your trade, the same stuff you've held folded over your arm at 1,000 dinners. At the very end of all the gold, that is what the glory came down to and came down by. Servants and linen, holding the weight, easing it home. The staves of office are broken over the grave and cast in after him. The heralds cry the new king. And at the gates and along the ways, the almoner's men give out the funeral dole to the poor, meat and bread and coin, a river's last flood, and I cannot tell you from any document that a certain widow with a dark polished wooden bowl stood in that crowd with her bowl held out. The record keeps no gate lists, but you know she did, and so do I, and whatever was said over the dole that day, you may be sure some of it, from the oldest mouths, was God hold him, out of pure habit, a heartbeat before they remembered, and that is as fitting an epitaph as any carved one. The table he kept outliving the man he was by exactly 1 heartbeat in the mouths of the poor at a gate. What happened after is quickly told, and for once in this story I can give you the fates from the documents, because these are the documented lives. The child reigned. The men who had carried the trays and locked the doors those 3 January days carved up the power between them, and some of them died of how they carved it, but that is another England, another night's. The Queen, Catherine, who made the dangerous man good company, whose 11 weeks of regency you served with unafraid shoulders, married again within the year, for love this time at last, and had a daughter, and was dead of childbed fever inside 20 months of the king she survived. The gentlest player at that table held the shortest lease, and if there is a sadder small fact in this whole reign, I have not found it. The Admiral of France outlived the feast by 6 years. The fool served on 3 reigns' worth, and died in his bed an old man, which at that court was the rarest trick of all, and nobody ever begrudged him it. The palaces stand. That is not a figure of speech. Hampton Court stands this hour, and the great kitchen stand within it, all the roaring rooms you never entered, cold now, swept, roped, lit for visitors. You can walk in off the gardens today and stand at the very dresser, lay your hand on the cold stone of the hatch where the heat and the thunder came up, and the guides will tell you the numbers, the 1,200 oxen, the 8,000 sheep, the 600,000 gallons, Wendon's Psalms, still being recited to strangers 480 years on. The Eltham book survives, with its 13 dishes for the king's mess ruled out fair. The armour survives in its glass case, with the truth in inches for anyone who cares to read steel, and the accounts survive, the wage books, the greencloth's long ledgers, and in them, if you go looking, you will find the grooms and servers and tasters' men of the privy service. 40 shillings a year, name after name after name with nothing attached, no faces, no fates, no way home. Somewhere in those columns are the true men whose composite ghost you have been wearing all night, the real hands that held the towels and walked the galleries and chewed the careful morsel in the grey of those mornings. I told you at the start I would always show you the seam between the record and the borrowing, and here it is one last time, the widest seam of all. Everything in this story happened, and the one who lived it for you never did, and both of those things are true. And this is how the sleeping dead are honoured on this channel, by lending them our breath for a night, and giving it back with thanks. Whatever their names were, the accounts closed over them like water, the books balanced. Wendon would want you to know that. The books always balanced. So let the palace go now. It is a March evening in 1547, early in the new reign, and the household is smaller, and the fires are banked, and somewhere a boy-king's supper of sensible dishes has gone up and come down, and the great machine turns quieter, and you, the you of this story, 22 Kentish, employed, alive, climb the stair to the garret with your legs aching their honest ache, and lie down in the dark beside the snoring of new boys who think you are old, and this is where we leave it, because this is where it always ends on this channel. A tired servant, a dark room, a day's work done, and the enormous world outside the wall settling towards sleep like a bird turning on a bough. Think what your body knows now that Kent could never have taught it. The weight of a covered silver dish at the end of 40 yards, the sound a crust makes under a sure knife, the smell of rosewater over the smell of ruin, and the manners that held both without flinching. The taste of the king's own bread, taken morsel by careful morsel across a year of grey mornings, each one a small wager won. You never ate what King Henry ate. You and all your kind refused it daily in the deepest way there is, the way of men for whom it was never food at all, but the crown made edible, to be carried, guarded, tasted against death, and returned. And you ate your brown bread and your boiled beef and your Friday herring, and it kept you, and it kept Piers upright past 60. And the irony that no physician of your age could quite pronounce has been keeping the poor of England all along. The coarse loaf outlasts the fine one. It always did. Let the learned centuries argue the whys of it. There have been 400 years of doctors over that royal body since. Dropsy, they have said, and gout, and worse, and stranger words the Tudors never owned. And I will tell you plainly, as I promised always to tell you, which is documented and which is guesswork. The menus are documented, the leg is documented, the waist is in the steel, and every name the moderns put to it is a guess in a learned coat. The table is the fact. The table was always the fact. 13 dishes twice a day, ruled out fair in a clerk's even hand, and a man at the head of it whom all the ceremony in the world could not save from his own abundance, and men and women below it whom their plainness saved without their asking. You are warm enough, you are fed enough, you are safe enough. You have a coat and a craft, and a morsel of the finest bread in England waiting for you in the grey of tomorrow's morning, and that is more than the man under the stone at Windsor could say at the end, with all his kingdoms. That is enough. It was always going to have to be enough. It is tonight, at last, enough. And centuries will pass. The palace you know will change beyond recognition, and change again, and be loved by strangers. The great kitchens will go cold, and become a marvel that children walk through eating sweets that would have beggared your master. Sugar will grow cheap as salt, and the whole world will eat like kings, and the whole world will learn, slowly, expensively, in its teeth and its blood and its breath, exactly what you learned standing behind a golden chair with a towel over your arm, that the finest table is not the safest one, that abundance keeps its own quiet ledger, that the feast and the wound can share a room for years with music playing. Men will eat with little forks and think nothing of it. Physicians will finally find the names. But people will still gather at tables, still break bread and pass it, hand to hand to the ones they love, still keep in every family, without ever being taught, the old liturgy in little, the laid cloth, the best dish for the guest, the child served first, the empty chair remembered at the holidays. Some things don't change. The table doesn't change. The hunger under the hunger, to be fed, to be seated, to be safe among faces by candlelight, that has never changed once in all the centuries between that palace and your pillow. So let it go now. Let the trumpets fade down the galleries. Let the fires die on their hearths, one by one, watched by no one. Let the ledgers close and the linen fold, and the last door be locked by the last tired man with the keys. Let the whole vast house of it, king and clerk, widow and fool, the castle of sugar and the coffin of lead, sink down together into the dark it all came from, gently, gently, the way a dish is set down at the end of service, and let sleep take you the way it took a young man from the Kentish marshes in a garret over the outer court 480 years ago, with his hands finally still and his face finally his own, fully, kindly, and without one single dream of dinner. The dish goes up, the dish comes down, the candle stands steady and gutters and goes. You've earned this rest 1,000 mornings over. Take it. Good night.